Hey guys, so today I want to talk about a topic that I feel is very misunderstood. And I know this is off topic of what I've been talking about lately with my homeschooling videos and near-death experience story videos and stuff, but this is something that is it's in me and I have to get it out. So I hear this all the time, especially in Christian circles and especially in the church, and I have a hard time understanding how we have not moved past this yet. But it's this idea where the Christian church specifically is reacting to the culture and to what they perceive to be more liberal interpretations of Christianity, that God is love, and saying no, God is not love. God is love, and He is justice. Specifically, justice is usually used. Sometimes the word holy is used, but usually it's no, God is not just love. God is love, and God is justice. And I think that this is a tremendous misunderstanding and something that needs to be addressed. And so I, with my handful of followers on this channel, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. So first of all, we're misunderstanding what love is. Love oftentimes is seen as weakness, as just emotion, maybe as some wishy-washy feeling, putting feelings before facts and logic, specifically letting people get away with things. Maybe in the case of a parent being too soft and lacking in discipline would be a description of being too loving as a parent. So first of all, there's a real misunderstanding of what love is. And we need to define what love is before we can go any further. So let's go to the Bible, and I could talk about this this topic from so many different perspectives and sources, but I'm going to use the Bible because it is people who believe the Bible who are, for the most part, I hear making these statements about God isn't love, God is love, and justice. So let's start with perhaps the most important verses defining what love is. 1 John 4:8 and 1 John 4:16, and they both say the same thing. Very simple. God is love. This is something that a lot of people, they feel that to just say God is love can't be accurate, so we have to add to it all this other stuff, but really, this is what it says. It says God is love. And it says it twice. So basically, whatever God is, that's what love is also. This puts love to a whole new level. Something that might actually be really difficult for us to understand fully. But we're going to try to get some sort of a definition with this video. Let's look at a couple other passages. So we can go to Song of Solomon 8:16, where it says love is stronger than death. So whatever love is, it is not weak. It is stronger than death, which would make it pretty powerful. We can look at 1 Corinthians 13:8, where it makes the statement that these three, faith, hope, and love, will remain forever, but the greatest of these is love. So, according to 1 Corinthians 13, there are three forces which will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these three things is love. That would make love the most powerful force in the universe. So we've got love is stronger than death. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. Love is God. God is love. Love and God are interchangeable. So let's leave the concept of love and let's jump over to the concept of justice. I would say that justice has also been misunderstood, but we're going to go back through some history and we're going to see why. So normally we think of justice along the lines of almost more like vengeance, of somebody getting their just due for what they did. We see justice almost along the lines of punishment. That people need to be punished for their actions to both protect the innocent and to prevent them from acting that way in the future. So let's look at the idea of justice and how it came to mean what it does today. So justice, according to my understanding, was an idea that evolved in ancient times, around the time that the Old Testament was written, for instance, but it was not just an idea that was exclusive to Hebrew culture. We see examples of similar codes of law, like the Old Testament, being developed in other civilizations in ancient times, probably the most well-known of them being Hammurabi and his code. So Hammurabi was an ancient Babylonian king in Mesopotamia who is well known for his code. It's actually called Hammurabi's Code. So in the ancient world, up until the time of Hammurabi, dictators ruled the people of Mesopotamia, and they basically did whatever they wanted. So they could rape, they could steal, they could kill their people, they could torture and beat and execute their people for no reason whatsoever except that they wanted to. And in that world, it's a world that's hard for us to understand here in America, but there was no rule of law. It was a concept that hadn't been invented yet. People were at the whim of their rulers, and whatever their neighbors, the people around them, could steal from them, could kill them, could do whatever, take advantage of people, and there was no consequence. Now, Hammurabi changed that, and he claimed that he received a code of laws from his god that he worshipped. He worshipped one god, and when the people around him worshipped multiple gods, and he claimed that his god gave him this code of laws. So, if you read through Hammurabi's code, you can look it up and read it. Many of the laws sound very similar to Old Testament laws. And basically what it did is it instituted a code of justice, the rule of law, so that people could not be taken advantage of, and to protect the poor and oppressed. And the interesting thing is that, and this has often been pointed out about the Old Testament laws also, that many of the laws, they seem barbaric to us today. Read through the Old Testament laws. People could be stoned for disrespecting their parents or breaking the Sabbath day, and we look at some of these things and question, is that really what God's will was for those people? But we see this in other codes of law, like in Hammurabi's codes. For instance, if a carpenter was to build a house and the house was to collapse and kill the people inside it, the carpenter was supposed to be put to death. There were many other laws that weren't quite so barbaric, but basically, say a herdsman committed fraud and didn't give the owner of the sheep that he was watching all the money that he was supposed to give them, then he had to repay the owner of the sheep 10 times. Just different things like that. And basically what it did for the first time in human history is it brought justice into the story. It held people accountable for their actions so that people knew, if you do this, this is going to happen. You can't just take advantage of people. You can't just do whatever you want. And at that time in human history, that was a huge step forward. It was something that had never been seen before. And if you read the Old Testament, I read the Bible in chronological order in 3 months when I was pregnant with my first child. And one of the big things that really hit me during that time of reading the Bible so quickly, the themes of justice and mercy. That's what the Old Testament is all about. It's what the entire Bible is about, but particularly the Old Testament, it is justice and mercy, justice and mercy. It's all about justice and mercy. It's all about protecting the poor and the oppressed and the foreigner, making sure that the widow and the orphan are taken care of. These are all concepts that were radical for that time. Okay, people just didn't do that. But it was justice and mercy went hand in hand. Justice and mercy were sort of seen as the same thing. And in that time, justice, that idea of justice was very merciful. And this idea of justice, it really was an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And actually, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, that was in Hammurabi's code also. And it is listed 3 times in the Old Testament. And really, we look at it now and we think that's sort of barbaric. But for that day, it was revolutionary. It meant people can't get away with whatever they want. So if you put out your neighbor's eye, then your eye's going to get put out. If you knock out somebody's tooth, then your tooth is going to get knocked out. There's consequences for your actions. So this is basically where the context of where our idea of justice evolved, and when justice first made its entrance into human consciousness and civilization. But here's the thing. The thing is that we as humanity have a tendency to get stuck in a move of God that happened in the past, and then we don't move forward to see what he's actually doing now. And I think this is a prime example of this happening. That was a move of God for that era. Was it God's perfect will? Violence for violence, is that what God requires? Well, that's sort of the question that we're answering with this video, because saying that God is love, but he is also just, and he punishes sins with more violence. Is that true? I have a video on love without at least taking a moment to look at the most famous chapter on love in the Bible. So let's quickly look at 1 Corinthians 3, verses 4 through 7. And here we're going to find something really interesting. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. So here's a chapter that I would say most people have heard, even if they don't read the Bible, have never been to church. Most people have heard this passage. Love is patient, love is kind. And right in the middle there, we see something that has a huge bearing on our conversation about love and justice. It says, love keeps no record of wrongs. So if the question is God love, or is he love and also justice? And justice is defined as repaying people just dues for their actions. That requires not only keeping a record of wrongs, but repaying those wrongs. I think that the church today is still stuck in an Old Testament understanding of justice. But what we have to understand is that history in general and the Bible specifically are not accounts of God changing or of God's will for humanity changing. History in general and the Bible specifically, they are accounts of our understanding of God changing, of understanding God and what he wants from us, growing and evolving. So at that time then, that was the revelation they received. That's what they were ready for. But where are we now? That's the question. And we can find an answer by jumping to the New Testament, where Jesus, who the Bible says was the perfect revelation of God, Jesus, who claimed to have come to show us what the Father is like, has something to say about this issue. We can go to Matthew 5, where this exact subject of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is discussed. Verse 38, you have heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury. That's justice, our understanding of justice, what we just described. Goes on to say, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, quoting the 3 Old Testament passages. But I say, this is Jesus, the perfect revelation of God's perfect will speaking to us. But I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Give to those who ask, and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. We can shed some more light on this passage by jumping down to verses 43 through 45, where Jesus is still addressing this subject. You have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemies. But I say, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. In this way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. What we see in this passage and what Jesus is saying is, yes, this is a law that was in the Old Testament. He's not denying that, but he's saying, if you want to act as true children of your Father in heaven, then you have to not bring justice to your enemies, not repay an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth, not give them the just consequences of what they deserve for what they did. Now we have evolved to a higher understanding. Now, as humanity, we are ready for a better way, for a truer representation of what God's will is for us, what His will has always been for us, but we just were not ready to understand. We had not progressed to the point where we could do this yet, but now we have. And God's true will for us is to love our enemies. Love our enemies. Return good for evil. He's not talking about being a wimp and just letting people take advantage of you. And this is where we talked earlier that love is misunderstood as weakness. That's not what he's talking about. He's not talking about just let people, slapping you around. What he's talking about is intentionally, powerfully repaying good for evil. When someone does something evil to you, it is not God's way to repay them for their crime, for what they deserve. It is God's way to overcome the evil that was done to you with good. What happened here? Did God change? Did His will change? No, God has always been the same. We just didn't understand. We weren't at a place in human history where we could understand. We're talking about people who were living in complete and utter chaos without the rule of law, with nobody held accountable for anything. And for them, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, that was progress. That ensured that people didn't get taken advantage of and didn't get oppressed. But now we've moved past that. Now we have to be stronger than that. Now we're way past. People who claim to know God and to know Jesus have to be way past that idea of being oppressed by the evil around us. We have grown in our understanding to the point where we understand we can't be oppressed. If we have love in our heart, love overcomes darkness. Light overcomes darkness. Good overcomes evil. Love overcomes evil. That's the way the universe works. And I would propose to you that if we continue to follow the moves of God where they have led throughout history, and we continue to go into the future following where God would lead, then what we're going to find is that love and justice not only are very different than what we thought they were, but they are actually the same thing. What we find is that love is not weakness. Love is the ultimate strength. Love is the ultimate power. It's the ability to overcome evil done to us with love. It's the most powerful force in the universe. It has the power to change hearts. It has the power to dispel darkness. It has the power to bring everything into perfect harmony, which is another way of describing justice. Justice isn't an eye for an eye. Today we understand that justice is actually something so much bigger, and that justice is actually not repaying evil with evil. It's actually overcoming evil with good. It's shining the light of love into people's hearts and seeing them change. The Bible says a few more interesting things about love that I would like to mention here. 1 Peter 4:8. Most important of all, continue to show deep love for each other, for love covers a multitude of sins. This theme is actually repeated throughout the New Testament. It actually says this, something along these lines of love covering a multitude of sins, in two other places in the New Testament. Prime example of is obviously Jesus on the cross, where His love and His forgiveness actually overcame sin. But here, Peter is telling us that we also have this same power, that our love for each other can actually overcome people's sins. Does that mean that our love can forgive their sins? Can erase their sins? I would say that maybe it overcomes the damage that their sins may have caused us. It overcomes the hurt in our heart. It shines the light of love into their heart and offers them a better way. Some of these things are very mysterious. I don't know what the full and complete understanding is. We find another really interesting concept here in 1 John 4:18, where it says, "Such love has no fear, because perfect love expels all fear. If we are afraid, it is for fear of punishment." And this shows that we have not fully experienced his perfect love. Here's a passage that I've never heard preached in a church, because it goes against so much would believe to be true. We see here that love does not have to do with punishment. There is no fear in love. There is no punishment in love. This brings us back to the cross, where Jesus, his last words before saying, "It is finished, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit," what did he say before that? "Father, forgive them." So many people see the cross as an act of divine vengeance against sin, and Jesus taking that vengeance in our place. And that is one way of explaining what happened on the cross. There are many other explanations that I feel are more accurate, but that's a discussion for another video. But what people miss here is the fact that that was actually God himself on that cross, and his response was forgiveness. What people are missing is that it was the forgiveness that overcame the evil, not the wrath. That wasn't wrath poured out that satisfied the vengeance of an angry God. It was God on the cross showing us that the ultimate power over sin lies in forgiving, sacrificial love. I would propose to you that in light of all of this, in light of what happened on the cross, that love and justice are the same thing. They have nothing to do with fear. They have nothing to do with punishment. They have nothing to do with vengeance. They have nothing to do with repaying people for their actions. Nothing to do with repaying wrong for wrong, pain for pain, death for death, to somehow teach people a lesson. Love and justice don't have to do with retribution. They have to do with restoration. God is love. Everything came from God. So everything came from love. This world is made of love. You are love, I am love. And love and justice are just two words to describe the same thing, to describe the most powerful force in the universe. The substance from which the universe was made, the stuff of what we are all made of, the glue that is holding everything together. Love and justice, it is the ultimate harmony. It is the ultimate perfection. It is the ultimate connection between all living things, connecting us to our Creator, pulling us back into harmony. All throughout the Bible, we see themes of things like rebirth, purification, sanctification, which is becoming holy, overcoming death with life. It is everywhere throughout the Bible, and I think that love and justice are the same force, and they are the force of God, which is working in the world to bring creation back into alignment with perfection, with holiness, with harmony, with everything that is good and right and perfect and beautiful. And whatever form this may take, it will be perfect for each individual and each situation to bring them to a knowledge of God, to help them to melt the walls around their heart and let the love and light of God inside. And the process may not always be pleasant. Pain and pleasure, heartbreak and joy, lack and abundance, yes, even heaven and hell, whether here or in another reality, can all be a part of this process. But there was never any fear, there was never any punishment, there was never any vengeance associated with it. No, the goal has always been love. The goal has been reconciliation, restoration, rebirth, growth. Whatever form those things might take, the heart of it is, practically speaking, a genuine desire for each person's best interest and ultimate good. That is what love is. That is what justice is. They are both the same thing. But life is not about reward and punishment. Life is about growth. And God is a loving Father. And just like a parent does with their children, God works in each of our lives. And in every situation, His desire is for their best interest. Some of this may require some painful and difficult processes that we go through. Some may involve consequences that we bring upon ourselves with our own choices. But if the Bible is to be believed, punishment and fear have nothing to do with it. Now we have a new definition of both love and justice. And the question is God just love, or is He love and also just? And with this new understanding, we see that the question itself is irrelevant. Love and justice are the same thing. They're two ways of describing the same thing, of describing the force that created this universe, is holding this universe together, and is pulling everything and everyone back into harmony with itself. You can't, to say that God isn't just love, He's love and also justice, that's missing the whole point. It's overcomplicating things. So in the end, I would say that there are many ways that we can describe love. We could describe love as justice, holiness, perfection, joy, peace, healing, restoration, forgiveness. But they're all just different ways of describing the most powerful, wonderful, beautiful, restorative, rebirthing, purifying force in the universe. And that force is love. So I would say that God is love, and that is enough. Feel free to share your opinion with me in the comments. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Do you have something to add to this conversation? Be loved, be happy, be at peace, and I will see you next time.